I guess we could start with talking about like specifically what peaking looks like in endurance sport. I know we talked about generally reducing volume, but like where do you reduce volume the most? Is that athlete dependent? Like how many weeks ahead do you start peaking? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, it really depends on the race, distance, and like priority of the race. So if it's, we usually have like A, B, or C races. So if it's a C race, we're probably just going to train right through it. We're really not gonna peak. Um, for an A race,
Why do the
again,
C
it
race then?
depends. For practice, especially in triathlon, you want to make sure that you know what you're going to be doing on race day. So doing I say low pressure, low stakes race to practice your transitions, to practice your nutrition and hydration during a race, to practice setting up your transition zone so that it flows smoothly, to practice taking off your wetsuit, getting out of the water, to practice, biking and running after swimming and biking. And obviously, you can do some of that stuff during training, but it's not the same as a live race
Sure.
experience. So I'm a big believer in doing that. And the other thing is like, okay, so if you only do your A races, well then you would have one or two races a year because not every race can be an A race. So
And that's
you're
not
going to
enough
fill your
races a year.
schedule. No,
Okay,
no, no.
so there's something that's so specific to actually doing the race that can't be replicated in a practice environment.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And most triathletes or runners or cyclists, like there are years that like I've done 20 triathlons in a season or in a year. And so,
And you didn't
some
quit
of
your
them are
sport.
like, I did not know. Some of them are just for fun, so it's like a C race. Some of them are like B races where, I want to do well, but don't really care. And then, a few are the A races where it's like, I want to go, I want to win, I want to do really well at this race. So those races are, like I said, maybe two a year because you can't peak for every race
Yeah.
because then it's not a peak, it's just a plateau. So, um, and again, depending on the distance, right? So if you're doing full Ironman or a 70.3 a half Ironman distance race, you're probably going to have that peaking and tapering lasting for maybe 2 weeks before the race because you have to start reducing volume. I don't want somebody doing a 6-hour ride the
Yeah.
week before their race because then they're just going to be too tired and fatigued to be able to compete. Um, Even then, 2 weeks before, I probably wouldn't have somebody do a 6-hour ride just for the same fact. Personally, I've done a race 3 weeks out from like my key race, and that race 3 weeks out was like a 25K, and my A race was a marathon. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like run this race. It's like a C race. I'm just gonna run it at my goal marathon pace. It's 15 and a half miles compared to the full marathon. So like 15 and a half miles should be fine. I'm gonna do this, see if I can run it at marathon pace, nice and easy, and then do the marathon 3 weeks later. And even that was too close. Like I felt tired for my marathon 3 weeks later. So, the longer the race distance, probably the longer the taper and the peaking needs to be, just because the volume can get so high, especially with triathlon, because you have three different disciplines that you can train. I realize I'm holding up four fingers now. I couldn't decide if I wanted to do that or that. Um, so, I mean, you can easily put 20 hours a week training for an Ironman, and a lot of people put even more time than that. So, I don't want somebody doing 20 hours the week before their race. So we'll definitely, cut back on the volume, keep the intensity up. But yeah, that taper, the peaking really kind of depends on the lengths. Obviously, the shorter races like a sprint or Olympic distance, you could really just go the week of the race and kind of like taper and peak there. All three disciplines become shorter. It's not really, I probably don't have for sprint and Olympic distance athlete, maybe like a 50-minute to an hour workout is the longest workout that they would do during the week. So it's just like, a shorter swim and a run on Monday, and maybe then just a bike on Tuesday, and then uh, a swim and a bike on Wednesday, and a run on Thursday. And then if their race is Saturday, maybe they would do like a 20-minute swim, a 20-minute bike, and a 20-minute run on Friday the day before. Doesn't have to be back to back to back, but you go for a swim, go home, get something to eat, get on the bike, and then do like a brick. So a brick is when you go right from one discipline to the next.
Mhm.
And we call it that because your legs feel like bricks
Oh,
after you go from
perfect.
biking to running. Um, so yeah, just quick little touches, practicing, getting your bike shoes off, run shoes on quickly, um, and just practicing those little things because and for most people those little things don't really matter. Like it doesn't matter if it takes you a minute or two to take your wetsuit off or to change your shoes or whatever, but when you're competing at higher levels, like some of my um, higher level athletes who are looking for every second, it can be really important. The transition is like the fourth discipline of triathlon. And when I won, I was the overall winner of the national championship a few years ago, and I won the race by 3 seconds. And if you added up the second place finisher, our total swim, bike, and run time, our swim, bike, and run times were identical, but I beat him by 3 seconds in transition, and that's how I won the race. So, some of those little details where I set my shoes up a certain way and my race belt and my gels and my sunglasses, like everything has a place to make it as efficient as possible. And running through that in whether it's training or in a simulated, not even a simulated race, in a B or C race, can be so important just to help you practice those things. And then even before the race, I will practice like sprinting from the transition area entrance to my bike, putting my helmet and sunglasses on, and then I will practice running back from the bike in position to my spot just so that I know where I'm going. Because those little details, like when you're competing at the national level, can make a big difference. So, yeah, some of that stuff then also gets added to the peaking where we're just practicing those smaller details.
Interesting. What is lifting completely gone at this point? Like in the 4 weeks up to a triathlon?
Maybe not the 4 weeks, but definitely not the week of or the week before. Um, so we could do some stuff still, like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks out. Um, I have no problem with my athletes doing that. It's just like the volume is probably going to be reduced a bit, just because we don't want any muscle soreness.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, we're going to reduce the volume quite a bit. Maybe instead of 5 exercises, we're only going to do two or three,
Yeah.
right? So, um, yeah, because the number one thing is we don't want any muscle soreness. We don't want any excess fatigue. And yeah, if they're already training 20 hours a week, swim, bike, and run, um, you know, the lifting then gets kind of cut those the week of and the week before the race.
Yeah. There's a few different ways that you could peak specifically for um, golf, and it just depends on if you're having multiple competitions like every week, or if you have like one you really want to win for. If you have multiple competitions every week, you kind of can't peak as well. So it's about like maintaining and kind of hoping to drop fatigue by the time you get to your tournaments. So like let's say if you're pro, you're starting on Thursday. If you're on live, you're starting on Friday. If you're college, it's usually like Friday or Saturday. Um, so you might see like a maintenance lifts essentially on like Monday and Tuesday. And then that gives you time, and you shouldn't be sore or anything on like maintenance training, but that would be kind of like a pretty good option. So maybe it's like lower body maintenance Monday, upper body maintenance on Tuesday, Wednesday is off, Thursday is travel, like that type of thing. Um, but then if there's like one that you really care about, it's kind of a similar thing. So you start by dropping off your accessory stuff. So like if in the when you were training the most, if you had accessory stuff that's kind of filling in the gaps, like let's just use curls as an example, although you could completely do away with curls, like those would be kind of the first things to go away. Um, and let's just say, um, well, because it's true, like plyometrics, squats, pressing. Those are like kind of this lifting rotational stuff. Those are kind of the staple things that need to stay like in a golfer's program. Those would obviously be some of the first exercises that we're doing on every single day. And then you gradually kind of are filling in the gaps to make sure there's not just like big holes anywhere. You kind of start from here and work your way up and how you reduce volume. So like you might still be squatting up until you get like somewhat close to it, but leg press, hamstring curls, other things like that are gone. Like maximal rotational swings, those might stay for quite a long time, but something like I don't, planks is a terrible example because I think most athletes shouldn't waste their time on planks. Let's see, candlesticks or something.
Why is that?
Oh,
Why do you think?
I'll tell you that in a sec.
Okay.
Candlesticks, those might go away first, and then from there, once everything's kind of gone away and you get really, really close, then it's about maintaining intensity and skill and specificity of sport, and then volume really gets deteriorated. And I would likely, like if it was like a major or something, I would be probably deloading like the Friday before, maybe even a little bit farther than that, maybe like 7 days before tournament starts, so Wednesday or Thursday. And that's where we're going in and we'll probably do like one session where it's half volume, half load. It feels like your whole workout is a warm up and it should take like 15 minutes. Other than that, like we would kind of leave it alone at that. Okay, planks for athletes. I'm prepared for half the population to write me fan mail and half the population to line up pitchforks. Um, so isometrics have a really bad track record of increasing strength and increasing skeletal muscle. So I think at the point where you get to any reasonable level of athletics, it's not necessarily the most taxing in a valuable way. Like there's not really much that happens in sport where you need to brace and hold in a static environment for let's say 2 minutes or however long you're planking. I think planks serve a really good purpose in building up if there's deficits, especially like rehab stuff. But once you get beyond that, for most athletes, doing something through a range of motion that you can um, progress and take you close to muscular failure is going to benefit a lot more people. So, like a golfer, like a plank is like possibly the least specific ab training you could do for a golfer. Basketball player, same thing. Like there's no amount of planks that LeBron James is gonna do that's gonna like tax him the way that dunking over someone does, right? Versus like weighted candlesticks or weighted rotations, med ball slams, things like that. That's much more specific to kind of what you would need.
Well, for a cyclist who's riding in the time trial position and they have to hold this position
Yeah,
in the time trial position for potentially like 5, 6 plus hours for a bike ride.
yeah. So I hate it less there, but then the next question is that how often is that a limiting factor? Your ab strength in that position.
For me, it's more the shoulders.
Shoulders?
Yeah.
Shut up, Google Calendar. Um, so then I would ask you this, could that not just be better trained by being in that cycle position more?
Yeah, potentially.
Just a
But
thought.
if I'm already doing that during my cycling, then would it not be advantageous to add it in during my strength training as well?
What does it feel when you say it's a limiting factor in your like cycle performance? Like what are you feeling there? What are you experiencing?
Well, it's more so being able to hold that position for an extended period of time. And if you can't hold that position, then you're not going to be aerodynamic and you're going to have to sit up or adjust or move. And really, any movement outside of here
Yeah.
is going to limit your speed because you're not going to be as aerodynamic. So
So you start to experience like it starts to
just
burn or
fatigue,
fatigue.
soreness. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. In that example, I love it, but then it would need to be those would have to be a ton of duration to like get benefit from it.
Yeah.
I would almost like because you said how long do you have to hold that position for?
For a sprint distance triathlon, 25 to 30 minutes for the fast athletes, potentially longer for an Olympic distance, anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour for a half Ironman, 2 to 3 hours for a full Ironman. It could be, I mean, how long does it take to bike 112 miles?
Couple
5
minutes.
hours ish. Yeah. Yeah. five
Um,
hours.
okay, so then
So obviously, like doing a plank, you're not going to do a plank for 5 hours,
yeah,
right? Like, so, um,
I
yeah, but
still
I
would
always find
probably
personally,
go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say I find personally like planks are very difficult for me, not because of I feel it in my abs, but because I feel it in my shoulders. And the same thing happens when I get on the bike is I'm not limited in that aerodynamic position because of my abs. I'm limited in that aerodynamic position because of my shoulders. Now, like
We're at in
I
your
can hold
shoulders.
it up, like anterior delt mainly, I think.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
Is it ever like burning or is it just like those muscles are dead?
In planks, it's burning
In
during
your
the
sport, sorry.
yeah, during the triathlon. Um, yeah, sometimes it's burn. It's just like very, very fatigued. Like I just can't hold that position anymore, and I have to like adjust or just wiggle or move my arms a little bit. Um,
So I
yeah,
my thought there is like any training you're gonna do in the gym for that is just crappy training you could get on the bike. So then my thought there is if you just got this area, this is like your strength window, you just got it to like here,
mm,
sitting on the bike would be such a minimal thing for it. It would be like I don't know. Like I could go in there and get a 10-pound dumbbell and like hold it here for a very long amount of time, right? Versus if you were significantly weaker, it would be like harder. So I'm just having a hard time piecing together how doing more of the same thing that you're already getting a ton of exposure to on the bike would make a meaningful difference when you could use that to train the muscular endurance and then in the gym you could just get freaking strong up there.
with the planks though, because planks are more challenging than holding that arrow position on the bike because you there's more body weight against it. Right? Like because on the bike, you're sitting down on your butt instead of being on your toes. And so my thought was because it's like lifting a heavier weight than I would during my sport, that it could have some translation to the sport,
Yeah,
you know,
how long of a plank are you talking about?
a minute or two.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different and definitely I wouldn't say like we're talking about the area where I would say it's like not useless versus like the other sports that I described. But then
Right. Yeah,
even
yeah.
then, even then, I'm wondering like, what if you literally just did like a barbell landmine press? Or like a hold if you wanted to still do a hold, but even then I would say like you could do a hold too if you want to mimic your sport, but even then I would say like you're gonna get so much more out of it just doing a range of motion, just building up
Yeah.
a absurd amount of strength in that area.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you that most sports isometrics are not really advantageous because in what sport do you hold an isometric position for the entire
Yeah.
length
And
of
then
the
you
sport?
came up
Like,
with one.
right, right, right. But that's like, okay, cycling is one. I was even thinking swimming because you're in the prone position the entire time, but you still have rotation.
Yeah.
So instead of doing a plank, like like you said, do rotational med ball tosses or something like that. Those are going to be more advantageous than holding a plank. So, I think there are very few sports where you actually hold an isometric position. Potentially time trial cycling would be one, but yeah, no,
Esports.
I agree with you. Esports,
Yeah.
where are you doing isometric? Like your hands are moving, unless you're like just sitting straight up the entire time, but nobody's doing
No,
that.
this is the esports.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think that planks are the best abdominal exercise. There are a lot of other things, more functional things that you can do for the majority of sports. So yeah, I'm not going to send you any hate mail. I'm going to send you the fan mail.
Perfect. I come from my wife's family tends to be really pro plank and like pro just stuff like that. So that was definitely a long journey to trudge against, I would say.
Did you end up convincing them that planks were not the answer?
Um, I don't know. I think they all have. I don't think they all of them think about it deeply enough to like care. The ones that do went to physical therapy school, so they got their own education on it
Mhm.
too. Like, and in that instance, planks are probably a lot better. Like when you deal with like degraded injured populations. Um, yeah, I'll I don't I don't plant my flag on hills to die on to like make friends. I do it because that's my interpretation of literature and
Yeah,
oh well.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, this is what science says, at least right now, anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
Um
that's the thing, right? Like, you have to be willing to change where you plant your flag based on new literature that comes out,
yeah.
right? Because like you can't just stick your flag in the hill and say I'm dying on this hill, right? It's like, okay, well, but what if the hill changes? There's erosion or right? Like,
That'll actually be a fun way to end it because we got about 4 minutes left. I'll go first, but be
sure.
thinking of it. Like some things that you've like changed your mind on. Um, so a few that I've changed my mind on. I used to think that like high intensity interval training was uniquely magical compared to just the amount of physical activity that you're doing. Um, Now we know pretty clearly that it's just the amount of physical activity you're doing, and there's different costs associated with it. You'll burn more calories quicker, but you'll expend like a little bit less later or fatigue yourself
Mhm.
more that you might not give as much in the gym, etc. So just pick whatever you like. But then the other one is I used to thought I used to
Easy
think
for you to say.
I used to think that bird dogs were some type of like wizard magic sorcery stuff. And now I'm just looking at the exercise and I was like, what area of the body is this exactly taking close enough to muscular failure that anyone would adapt to it outside of someone that's severely degraded? And the answer is
Yeah.
none.
I think it's more of like a balance exercise than anything.
Yeah, and even then the
Like,
foundation of balance is just getting like really strong. So like
yeah.
I would rather you get strong and then work through specific balance issues than start with something that's unstable. So those are kind of my, what
Yeah,
do
I
you
think
got?
my two, one is that athletes who participate in like endurance exercise should do muscular endurance lifting.
Hmm.
And that one is like completely the opposite of what you want to do
Yep,
because like I think we've talked about this before,
we
but
did.
runners, you're essentially doing quarter squats every time, single leg quarter squats every time that you run. Um, so you shouldn't be doing the same thing in the gym. You should be doing muscular power because running is jumping from one foot to the next. And the more powerful you can be with each stride, the more ground you're going to cover. Um, and then the other one is that, not all of your running should be fast or like any endurance activity. You shouldn't always just try to run fast, fast, fast. The majority of your running should actually be much, much slower than you would run in a race. And I was out for a run a couple of weeks ago and some friends were on the trail and I was like taking a walk break in between just my easy running intervals and they all three were like, "Hey, are you okay? Like, you good? Like, what's going on?" I was like, "I'm just taking a walk break. Like, even fast people do it." So I think that that's still a big one out there that, a lot of people think, oh yeah, Todd, you always must run like 5 minute pace on your runs. So it's like, no, I'm really like closer to 7:30 or 8 minute pace normally on my easy run. So I know I made that mistake when I was a fresh newbie runner, was just like running all of my runs too fast. So yeah, you just gotta take it easy most of the time. So yeah, those are my main two that I really changed my mind on after really getting into the literature and the research.
Yeah, that's, I would say something like a personal issue that I fell into was I started my lifting career just training to all out failure. And then I moved into my lifting career to like lazy, probably training like 4 reps from failure. So I just spent a lot of my early lifting career kind of like skipping where I should be for a majority of it. Like 2 reps in reserve
That's
never occurred to me. It was like blood, sweat, and tears, or like, I really don't want to be here.
that's how it works.
Yeah, but I mean, it worked out. I gained like 26 pounds of muscle, DEXA on my first year of lifting. So
Nice.
genetics.
Yeah.